Connie Gunzenhauser. I am Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences here at Roosevelt University, and I want to welcome you all to this conversation about race and politics between our own Rubloff Professor of Public Policy, Ralph Martire, and State Senator Toi Hutchinson, whom we're thrilled to have with us. And Ralph will do a more detailed introduction. So every fall at the university, as some of you know, we host a conference about the American Dream Reconsidered, where we wrestle with different aspects of the American dream, where we're achieving it, where we might be falling short, who we're leaving behind, how we can build a bigger tent. And so to keep that theme alive during the year, we have a series of lectures and talks around the theme of the American Dream Reconsidered, and this event today aligns with that theme. And so our conversation about race and politics happens under that umbrella. And without further ado, because you're really here to hear from our speakers, I'm going to get off the stage and turn it over to them. We're going to have some conversation and then plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So as things strike you, make a note of it, and we'll have time to circle back. So welcome and enjoy.
Okay. All right, Toi, so I'm supposed to introduce you.
Okay.
Which is a little awkward for me because, you know, we're a little close.
Just hey.
But things you should know about Senator Hutchinson, and I could do the standard thing and run through her bio. I'm not going to do that. I'll pull a couple of things. She was determined to be the Legislator of the Year by Governing Magazine this year. So.
But it was in a certain category. It was really for work and sexual harassment across the chapter, so it wasn't a legislator of everything.
Yeah.
It was
I did make her sign my copy of Governing Magazine, however, with that on it.
I made the cover.
And she is the president of the National Conference of State Legislators. So this is a woman whose influence goes well beyond Illinois, well beyond Illinois. Here's the thing about Toi. She's been in the Senate how many years now? When did you
10
first
years.
come in? 10 years. I probably sat down with Toi within a month or so of her first entry to the General Assembly. And her first words to me were, I don't care about the politics of this. I want to know the policy inside and out so we can get the policy right. I'll deal with the politics. Her entire career, she has not worried about the political impact on her of any stance she's taken, as long as she's taking a stance for doing the right thing. And I heard her in one campaign, I'm going to paraphrase you, Toi, if I get it wrong, correct me, but she was debating one of her other candidates for her position. And the other person was talking about, I want to win because of this, and I want to win because of that. And Toi goes, I don't care why you want to win. What are you willing to lose over? She says, I'm going to tell you what I'm willing to lose over. I'm running this race because I will X, Y, and Z, politically tough, contentious issues that I am willing to lose over if you're not going to support me doing the right thing. How many elected officials do we get to do that? She is brave. She is brilliant. She has fought for doing the right thing her entire career. And it's really an honor to bring her here to Roosevelt and have her be part of our program. So thank you.
That was supremely awkward. Thank you. Thank you.
So talking about awkward.
It is, what it is, where it's like when you sit next to some, that is just awkward. And,
Yeah.
and you know, it is one of those things too for women in politics, because lots of us are not raised to brag, and you want to make people feel comfortable. And so sometimes you can easily fall into the kind of dim your own light, dim your own thing. Or when you're in a situation when it's time to come say, well, this is what I've done. Very different than when dudes run for office. They're like, I'm the best because I'm the next, and this is what it is I'm doing, and I'm going to be the. And we're like, how am I going to raise my kids? Where am I going to raise money? How do I put this together? I don't know if I'm really qualified. Let me think about this some more. It's a different kind of deliberative process. So my friend here, when he waxes nostalgic about being proud of me, it means something more to me because he's my friend. So that's why that was awkward. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, you know, there's a lot of awkward things in America today in race and politics. I think
Awesome segue. That's such a good segue.
move right to the top of the list.
Let's just get right to it.
Yeah, well, and you and I, we come at it in very different ways, and we've worked on it together your entire career. So I'm also, in addition to being the Rubloff professor here, which is an extreme honor, the executive director of a bipartisan think tank, the Center for Tax and Budget Accountability, that's going to be affiliating with Roosevelt over the next couple of years. And our think tank has had an initiative on structural racism for, 15 years now, just because of what the data tell us about the disparate experiences people have in this country predicated on their race and their race alone. So we come at it from a data-focused systems analysis standpoint. You come at it from a slightly different standpoint.
It is. It's one of those, we know we operate in a world right now where our opinions are spread out in way more ways than we could possibly have imagined a couple years ago. The way we consume media, the way we consume information, the way we consume all those things is, there used to be a time when there was 3 newscasters and everybody got a set series of facts and you had a bunch of opinions about those things. But we've now moved to an area where you can stay in a bubble and only talk to people who look like you, think like you, and reinforce what you already think you know. On top of the fact that we are now no longer in agreement on the basic set of facts. So it's very difficult to negotiate or to debate when you're not debating from the same place. So if someone's trying to solve a problem that I don't recognize as a problem, or vice versa, it's very difficult to be in the middle of those conversations. When I come to that talk, especially about structural racism, and why it was so important that we hooked up as early as we did, just because when I would talk about needing data, needing to be able to understand, to kind of formulate why I'm doing what I'm doing and why I wanted to challenge what the common thought process was, is because I come to it from at the intersection, that I cannot draw a line down the middle of myself and tell you whether I'm more woman than I am black. This is just me. This is how I present. And when I face the world, when I present myself the way I present myself, there are some things that happen right there in that middle. Just like the work we did on sexual harassment, racist behavior can be sexualized and sexist behavior can be racialized, and it's a totally different thing when you sit in that space that way. So it's been really an honor, and I think it's made me smarter in that we were able to collaborate the way we did, because then when I would stand up and talk, I can give you the emotional, I can tell you how I feel about this, I can demand that you see me, but I can also back it up with data, and I can also back up, put that data in the picture of somebody's mind, of a real person that's sitting there explaining to you how I sit in the world. And that the only reason why I'm here is because I'm supposed to be a voice for the people who can't be. So I need numbers, I need information, I need data, I need spreadsheets, and I need to be able to articulate that in a way that makes it so that every single one of those numbers on that spreadsheet is now not just an ambiguous thing in the middle of a column, but their lives. It represents people's lives. And so when people talk about this in ways that I find really cynical, you have really helped me. The CTBA has really helped me quantify, I think, the quality of the arguments that I make.
Oh, thanks, I really appreciate that. I mean,
Was that awkward for you?
That's a little awkward for me.
Because it was really good. Yeah.
And everyone knows I don't quite have Toy's problem about an ego. I have healthy and large ego, so there you go. That even made me feel a little awkward, so good job. All right, so it is more personal for you, Toy, and you've had 10 years of experience. So what are some of the most memorable racially charged incidents you've had in Springfield? I'm aware of a few of them.
So when I talk about how sometimes sexist behavior or bullying behavior can be racialized, when we were in the middle of the budget impasse, I'm the chair of the Senate Revenue Committee. And there's never been an African-American woman chair of the Senate Revenue Committee. We're talking about $37 billion that goes through. I mean, the money comes into the committee, and I'm charged with trying to figure out how to keep as much of it as we can, because of the perspective that I come to this with. And that means all tax credits, deductions, exemptions, anything that comes through the tax code. And so that also meant that because the budgeting process is normally, we had budgeteers, and those were normally your approach chairs. And so if you think about the dynamics in the Capitol, the people who were all negotiating, literally all men, there had never been a black chair of revenue, much less a woman since Don Clark Netsch. Right. So I was the next revenue chair after Don Clark Netsch. And so I ended up having my name as the only name on a tax bill that was going to raise taxes. And none of my colleagues wanted to put their name on the bill next to me because it was going to be about raising taxes. And so Ralph and I used to joke all the time. It's like, if it's going to be taxes and toy, I need to be an expert in this because that's way too alliterative. Like, I need to really lean into this. So I have my name on this tax bill alone. And aside from the messages that were like, I can't wait to piss on your grave, you overtaxing skank whore, that would come directly to me. The time the state police would have to go knock on somebody's door because it's time to get the noose to clean out Springfield. You know, you don't know how the kinds of ways that we have normalized hate speech in our regular everyday lives. So like when you're sitting at, at a table with your relatives and people talk about how horrible all politicians are, there is an escalator that is present there. Because if that's what we accept as normal, that all politicians are liars, crooks, thieves, and they're all out to get you, and it doesn't matter who you are. But then people come to me and they're like, not you. I'm like, well, who? Who? And you have to stand in face, like not necessarily knowing whether the heightened vitriol that I'm experiencing, is it coming to me because of this, or is it coming to me because of this? And I don't necessarily know it because it's not quite cool. It was, at least up until about 2 years ago, wasn't quite cool to come out and explicitly say something racial. So in the midst of that, like it's a scary time to go through that. It's a scary time to be present in the world and know that you don't always know the difference between a keyboard coward and somebody who would actually do something. My district, I represent a district that is, I to this day have no idea how I am the senator. I swear I don't know how, because on paper I shouldn't be. And for whatever it is you hear about that awful word gerrymandering, it didn't work for me because my district does not look like me. So I represent Southern Cook County, Will County, Kankakee County, and Grundy County. So it's suburbs and farms. So people come up to my office with gun racks on the back of their car. I've had everything from stories like, Toy, I get why some people shouldn't have guns. I get, some people, the military and police, and I get all that. But I was just out and I bought these last rifles for myself and my grandfather, and we hung them up. We were waiting, and I got one for my son too. And I was like, oh wow. He was like, yeah, but when Wyatt's ready, this is why. And he knows that's his rifle. I knew who he was. I knew who his family was, and I knew Wyatt was 5. So talking to him, for him, this is a cultural thing. He wasn't trying to get into any policy discussion, any of that kind of stuff. I present in a district where the southern part of it is about 54% Republican, and the racial demographic makeup of the district is pretty much 65-68% white. So in some places when I go in there, I might as well be Barack Obama's sister, and they don't know, like, why don't you just go back to where you came from? Normally I find that the commentary or the vitriol that comes to me does tend to be sexualized quite a bit, and that they'll pull out like the race stuff, but it tends to be one of those things that moves in that direction. I worked on a bill for strip clubs. So it was a service fee for strip clubs to go to sexual assault and domestic violence centers. And someone wrote a letter and actually mailed it to the Capitol that talked about me and Michelle Obama needing to go back to Africa, and you can't get anybody and that's why you're doing this, because nobody wants to be with you anyway, kind of nasty, disgusting stuff. But actually put it in the mail and sent it to the Capitol. And it came from Peoria the day before I was supposed to be in Peoria. So now I'm just a rank and file state legislator who now has pretty much a security detail along with the lieutenant governor at the time, because of all, it tends to be like this kind of like lightning rod of stuff. And so that's why I go back and say, I can't draw a line down the middle of myself and tell you whether I'm more woman or more black, but I do know that as an African-American woman, how you see me is what it gets presented. The minute I walk into a room, there's no way you can put it to the side, there's no way you can, any of those things. And so I just have to, you just kind of have to keep your head, when I say keep your head down, I don't mean bow down to anybody. I mean just keep your head down, do good work, keep moving. But it has been an interesting thing to be in a constant situation where I am educating. And I know most people, especially now, as we are talking about people, all of us who are woke, And you need to make space for people who are in the process of waking up when you're woke, because we want them to wake up. So you can't kill them before they wake up. You gotta like let them come on. But to constantly be in a position where you're educating, because honestly, it's exhausting. It's like try to solve the problem, identify the problem, solve the problem, work to fix the problem, and then educate people as to why it's a problem is exhausting. It is exhausting. But it's also necessary. And a very current example, so we're dealing with cannabis legislation right now.
Yep.
And that sits right also at the intersection of criminal justice reform, of reforming drug policies, and equity in that space, in the face of legalizing something that, you know, is really complicated. And we had somebody from the industry, the existing industry, come in and sit down and say, yeah, you know, we need to control for all the bodegas on street corners selling Hennessy and Newports and weed. And I was like, did that man just say, did he just hit Hispanic people, black people, poor people, and urban people all in one sentence with no hint of irony? No hint of irony whatsoever. So me and colleagues, we're texting each other, we're like, number one, that bodega sounds awesome. Maybe we should go there. We should just go there. But then on the other hand, it's like, now I gotta raise my hand again and be like, here comes Toy educating. Like, let me explain something to you about, and the knowledge that half the people in the room heard him talking about zoning. They didn't hear him say, they didn't hear what I heard. Because what I heard was bodegas on street corners selling Hennessy and Newport. Hennessy and Newport is specifically to African Americans. The bodega is specifically to Latinx, Hispanic, Latino people. It is, and then on every street corner, it's like, you're talking about urban areas. I'm like, this man said all of that and with a straight face, like he said, let's go to Target. Like it was just no big deal. And the thing that smacked me in my face and my colleagues as we were sitting there was that in that moment, half the room didn't hear what we heard. So when you talk about systemic racism, when you talk about structural racism and all the systems that underlie that make these problems so intransient, so difficult to solve, is because we are not seeing the same, we are seeing a video and viewing it differently. We are hearing words and hearing it differently. And we're living in a time right now where it is really, really easy to stay that way. So this issue of race, this thing where I find myself on a regular basis talking about how I think the new racism now is behaving like there's no racism. Because there's also been this amazing jujitsu trick. Like if I'm the one that brings it up, then I'm the one being racist. I'm sorry, I can't, what? How'd you just flip that back on me? But that's what's happening right now. And largely it's because we're not in a space yet where I think we've swept it under the rug for a very long time and not really dealt with the real issues that underlie it, so that we are not comfortable being uncomfortable. And this is a topic that you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And it's not gonna change until people who wouldn't normally talk to each other are in spaces where they have to.
Yeah, and so you've been great at that, actually. I mean, sometimes I've watched you talking with people maybe with a slightly different worldview and a different political affiliation than you, and they are saying things that, to quote a great person, make my teeth itch.
I say that all the time. I think it's the nicest way to be like, that, I don't like that.
which is like a clearly racist, not even a euphemism, a clearly racist term or a clearly sexist term. And Toy, you could see that she gets it, and then she's trying to find a way to break through the veneer and move forward with this person, because right, you got to work with her or him in the legislature. And you've used, and warms the cuckolds of CTBA's heart, you use things like data and evidence to make your case to try to get them to understand. And I think one of the big problems when people say racism is dead or whatever is that no one's willing to look at the facts. And no one's willing to look at what the data say. And I think education funding, which we've worked on a little in this state, is really one of those areas where you can see that. So Illinois, before we changed our school funding formula, had the second worst gap in funding per student in the nation between our school districts that educated the most children of color versus the school districts of the least. And the greatest gap in the nation based on income. The greatest. And during the campaign to change that, A lot of us, we talked about equity, and equity wasn't really resonating downstate Illinois, central Illinois, the suburbs. But then when we started talking about the evidence of these gaps and what that means in learning, so where it left us, our new school funding formula, it shows that the average white student in Illinois faces a funding gap between what their school should have and what they actually have per student of about $2,492 per kid. The average African American student, over $4,600 per kid. This is the gap. This has gone on for generations. And then you move that forward and you look at the correlations between educational attainment and economic viability in the modern economy, right? If you have a college degree, your unemployment rate is 2.7 times lower than if you don't have a college degree. If you have a college degree, you are earning 79% more in your weekly median wage than someone without a college degree. And yet, Illinois has isolated African Americans in communities and schools that are way underfunded, much more so than their white peers.
Right. And then to use those numbers to highlight what the it puts people back on their heels. So when you're in the middle of a negotiation or a debate and someone is coming from the framework that poverty is equal to being lazy. That if you're poor, it's because of something you're not doing. They don't see the intricate weave of policies and things that make it very difficult to break through that. That there's a basket and it's like literally a net that holds people back, and they don't see how this fits with this. They don't see how they're all interwoven. So when you're talking to someone who comes from that prison, like you just need to work harder, and you say, okay, well then how do you explain for this? How do you explain? Because at that point, then it's not about how hard you work. It's not about how hard the parents work. And matter of fact, I would contend that people who are working multiple jobs to string together a benefits package, people who leave for work in the morning when it's dark and come back home when it's dark and then go to sleep and wake up all over again, like literally, and do it all over again. That is number one, a tax that they pay on top of all the taxes that they pay. And that two, you can't look at those folks and talk about them being lazy or those people not working hard or not understanding the value of what it means to do a day's work. And it's like, even when I hear that thing, people need to understand the value of a day's work. Who the hell do you think you are to tell somebody that they don't understand the value of a day's work because you don't know what kind of work they do or how hard it is to piece it all together and then come home and have time to, because I remember just as a working mother, all of the impetus on how connected parents need to be to their kids and how much you have to stay on their homework and how much you have to stay on there, hope they have extracurriculars, hope they have all those. And you have parents that are like, it's all they can do to keep the utilities on and the lights on and a car to get into back and forth. And there's so many things that come into play where if you don't take into consideration why it is the way it is so that we can then stop arguing about Band-Aid solutions and get it fixing the crux of what the policies, what the causes are of this thing. You never get that way until you can somehow marry that in the mind of the person you're debating with. And I would say even for my side of the political spectrum, we can easily fall into the trap of, if I just educate them enough as to why I need to do this, then I'm gonna change their minds. The people on the other side of the spectrum hit you in your gut. They make emotional arguments that hit you in your gut. They're not making logical arguments, they're making emotional arguments. And they play on fears and they play on all kinds of things that make you move and act in a different way. And I don't wanna be in a situation where we're too erudite.
Right.
We're too this. I need to be able to talk about it in a way that hits you emotionally, tugs at your senses, and then when I got you, be like, and here's the data. So you tell me why this situation right now is okay. Because this can't be okay. If you accepted what I just said there and you felt me when I just said there, then you can't tell me that this is okay. And I'm not above shaming people. Because at some point we do need to be faced with the humanity of people and what people are faced with. I've never understood why people who hate people keep running for office. I was like, if you hate government and you hate, you know, like, and your whole thing is like, why are you running for this? If you don't like people, sit down someplace. Like, I'm doing this because I really do, in spite of myself, love people, even the ornery ones. Because it's hard. This is hard. It's hard talking to people who are unlikable. It's hard humbling yourself to like walk in and be like, I know that what you just said was mean and hateful. I'm going to talk to you anyway. Because this is a game of addition and not subtraction, and I need you to see. You know what? When you brought up before about, this is one of the things where you use word data. It was an old Oprah episode. And I remember this because I was, I think, either late high school or early college. And she did this show on racism, and she had, you know, it was back when she was still walking through the audience. You know, like, then security concerns got that you can't just walk through the audience anymore. So she was still walking through the audience and putting her arm around somebody and putting the microphone over here, like, okay. So they had police officers, and this is Chicago, so they had Chicago cops, and they had all these people talking about how one officer very earnestly was like, I don't see color. When I answer the call, I answer the call. I show up. I go where I'm supposed to be going, and I answer the call. Like, our job is to protect and serve. I don't see color. And this whole row of black women sitting in front, they were like, what? You get what? And so then Oprah runs down, and she goes to these women. She said, why did that hit you? How did that hit you? She said, there is no way in the world that any police officer in the city of Chicago doesn't know where they're going when they get that call. They know exactly what block that is. They know exactly what neighborhood that is. They know exactly what beat that is. You can't tell me that you don't see color. So then Oprah, in her infinite wisdom, because she's godlike, stood in the middle and she said, okay, here's what I think I hear. I hear him saying he's not attaching a value judgment to the color that he sees. Like when he says, I don't see color, it means I don't see color and think something bad immediately, is what he's trying to say. And what this woman is saying here is that if you don't see color, you don't see me. And you aren't allowed to protect and serve me if you don't see me. Which brings us to what colorblind policies do. Sometimes unintended and sometimes very intended to underrepresented communities. And if you unpack the word underrepresented, representation is to be seen. You can't love me, you can't fight for me, you can't serve me, you can't tell me you want to help me, you can't understand my issues if you don't see me. So being able to talk openly and honestly in a way that punches through the veil of defensiveness and all those things that kind of are built into the most immediate question of race in this country is the ability to see past the fact that we've got to bust through that. Otherwise, we will never move forward. We will stay stuck in our camps. We will stay stuck in a way that doesn't allow us to see each other. So understanding from a data perspective how people, like when they pointed out with this cop, they know that beat, they know this thing, we know what percentage of calls do this, we know exactly where it is we're going. Those are things that you can use to inform and illuminate policies that you use to come up with later, but not if you ignore them. Not if you allow yourself to be in a space where, in order to be polite and in order to not make people feel uncomfortable and in order to make it palatable to a large audience and you don't know who's listening to you, that you leave out the biggest thing that's in the middle of the room that affects half these policies, and that's race.
Yeah. I mean, you know, and some criminal justice data that I'm sure a lot of the folks in this audience already know, but it's interesting. So African American men are incarcerated at about 5.7 times the rate of white men. And just to put some more numbers to that, I actually had one of our researchers, Gabby Roman, pull these numbers together for me. For every 10,000 men in America, 2,613 black men will be arrested and incarcerated, whereas only 457 white. African Americans are 12% of the national population. Whites are 64. Something's wrong with that data. You know, and so for people who say we're colorblind, whatever way, no, we are not.
No, we're not. It's not possible to be.
No, we are not. And I think the economic data really bring that home. Every year, no exceptions, since 1968, the lowest unemployment rate in America is for whites. The next lowest, or next highest, I should say, is for Latinos. And the highest every single year is for blacks. Every single year. Can't tell me that's not race.
No, and here's how it ends up happening, like on the floors of chambers across the country. That we tout the unemployment figures when they go down. And then you hear the current occupant of the White House say he's done more for African American people than anybody else because they now have the lowest unemployment numbers in the history of the country, of the world as this man knows it. And has absolutely, and the people around him have absolutely no idea. It's sort of like the guy that made the bodega comment, like totally without, and he says it, and you look at it, and you're like, the fact that that data set doesn't do anything but move in the same percentages that it existed always. So it's always been that way. It's been that way since they've been keeping track. So even as those numbers go down, the brackets stay the same. The percentages stay the same. And the difference between those brackets stays the same. It continues to move that way, which is why you can look at the systems that are in place that continue to make it so that those issues don't change. So one of the things I always argue when I get data like this, and when I understand the data that I get, and this is what I'll do. It's like when I have this thing, I call Ralph and I'm like, could you have somebody run? I need a favor. Could you have somebody run the numbers on, and it's whatever it is I'm about to walk out, like 30, he says, when do you need it? About 30 minutes. Can you do it like 30 minutes? And half the time.
She usually doesn't give me quite 30 minutes.
Half the time, I mean, like, because I know where I can call, and I know half the time with all this research and stuff, they probably already have it. So I was like, can you just do a little search and all your stuff, so get this back to me, so that, because I'm about to walk on stage. Ralph, can I have 30 minutes? That's the kind of relationship we have. But when I hear those numbers, and then you can tie that back to whatever policy thing you're dealing with. It doesn't work without having accurate numbers in place to make the argument. And I say this over and over again. Because then you can tie the face and the people and the reality and what the color of the picture of the story is to those numbers and to that data. And I think that's what's missing in the way we debate all these things. It's usually one or the other. It's the gut punches, or it's elevated academic data that doesn't move you, because we're literally inundated with tiny bits of information coming from a million different places, and we self-aggregate what we allow ourselves to like take in. And because of all of that, it's really easy to get lost in the shuffle. Very easy to get lost in the shuffle. So to find and train people in the policy space to take that information and make it real for people and palatable for people, I think is really part of what's missing in the way we debate policy right now.
Well, you've done one more thing, though, and I've seen you do it. You move the agenda forward by focusing on this whole belief in the zero-sum game. Want to talk about that?
No, I don't know what you mean by that. What do you mean by that?
You do know what I mean.
You know what I mean? What do you mean? Like the zero-sum game? Like it ain't moving unless we ain't getting that unless we talk about it? That part?
No, not that part. If we bring up the bottom, we ain't going to be.
Oh, without accurate investment on the front end, you don't get good outcomes on the back end. So yeah, that is a when you talk econ 101.
You do this all the time.
I know. So you talk. Well, I didn't know what you meant by zero sum game.
Right.
That's because I'm not numbers. I'm vision.
Remember,
I'm just
nerd.
Right? Like, and me not. No, I was one of the cool kids. So it was when I come. It's like I'm talking.
She was one of the cool kids. I make Mr. Rogers look like Elvis. So we have a different
I was like,
approach.
I just like, let's make sure. And the other good part about this is that I can tease him mercilessly about being a nerd because it's really cool. But when we are debating resources and things, it's part of the way that I make it okay for me to be chair of revenue and deal in the tax space all the time. Because I don't view taxes as theft of my wages. Because if you come from a premise of taxes are theft of your wages and not, these are the taxes we pay and this is what we expect to get for what we pay for. This is what we want to pay for. So that's how you have this big, huge cognitive dissonance on, we think we can like fix everything by rooting out waste, fraud, and corruption, when none of the data shows you that that's what it is. We didn't just cut the meat out, we down to the bone and marrow in state government right now. So when I think about what I want high quality higher education systems. I want a world-class, highly trained workforce. I want kids, no matter where they live, no matter what zip code they live in, to have the opportunity to have a high-class, world-class educational system. And I don't want that to be determined by who they happen to be born to and where they happen to live when they were born. There's something fundamentally unfair about that. And so when I can get to people to say, you know what, it matters to you how you educate your children. A kid who can't read in Cairo should matter to me in Olympia Fields. The same way a kid who can't read in Rockford should matter to someone in East St. Louis, and vice versa. That this is one state. These are all our kids. These are all our things. And we pay taxes to do the things that none of us can do alone. None of us can do alone. When Elizabeth Warren came out, it was like remember that whole "you didn't build that thing"? And whole uproar, like, you didn't, how dare she, I built my business. Nobody does anything by themselves. Nobody. There's no way, and we're living in a time where it's literally like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but be still while I take your boots and your straps. And then act like that's fair. If you don't invest on the front end, you do not get the outcomes that you need on the back end. And that is a truism in anything. So for someone who walks in and says, we need to run this state like a business, well, y'all doing a bang up damn job doing that, because that's not how I would run a business. Like, it's like if I wanted to, that's just not how I would run a business. I would invest in the things that I wanted to grow in my business so that I could get the output that I needed on the back end. I would invest in equipment, I'd invest in people, I would invest in that. So I don't view, I'm fine with arguing about the level of taxation, and I'm fine with arguing about what the distribution of those things are. But I don't view taxes in and of themselves as an inherently evil thing. I view them as an investment into the things that we all need to do collectively. I can't pave my own streets. I can't lay bridges myself. I can't open up a shop and expect that I'm gonna keep people from robbing it away from my front stoop. I can't educate all these children on my own. I can't fix the air quality. I can't make sure the water is okay. I can't make sure that stoplight is hanging there. I can't do the car counts by myself. These are things I cannot do alone. I can't heal the sick by myself. I can't clothe the naked and house the homeless. And I can't answer all the Beatitudes by myself. I need help. I need you, and you need me. There's nothing any of us can do alone. So I can't disparage the state of the public education system and then complain about supporting it and using my time and my talent and the expectation that I receive a benefit from that as a reason to not invest in it. So for me, talking about taxes is more important to talk about what they pay for, and that lets me talk about the budget in and of itself as a moral document. Don't tell me what you believe in, show me. Because where you put your money is what you believe in. So either you believe in the upward advancement of children in this state, or you don't. You don't get to have it both ways. Don't tell me what you believe in. Show me. I'd rather see a sermon than hear one any day.
Sorry, Reverend Brazier.
Hallelujah.
Have you ever felt, Toy, that because of your race, you had more to prove or more to overcome in the eyes of the people you're working with? Have you felt that challenge?
So there was a generational thing when I first came in. So that was the first time I had to explain to somebody why it wasn't a compliment to tell me how articulate I am.
Oh.
So sitting in a room and they're like, why does that bother you? I mean, we're trying to compliment you. I mean, you do speak so well. I'm like, am I clean too? And to gently then say, it's because the default position is that surprised you. That the expectation would be that I didn't or I wouldn't. So when I do speak well, it's a surprising thing for you. That is what we call unconscious bias. It's a mindset and a thing that you have. It's unconscious. It's not like you're doing it purposely. It's just you're surprised when someone who looks like me talks like this. Now, you have to account for some of the people who, like I've been complimented on my speaking ability or my speaking skills from public speaking professionals. So I mean, like you have to account for people who really are well-meaning. It doesn't mean that every time someone says, God, I love listening to you talk, that is inherently I'm surprised by you. It could really mean they really like to hear me talk, which is a really cool thing. But when that is the first thing, when that is the, when I've never ever heard, I have never been in a situation where someone white next to me was called articulate. They've said they're a good speaker. They say you tell stories. They'll say that's a very engaging speaker, something like that. But never, she was so articulate. Like, it's just never that. So I found one for age and the other part for race, and then the combination of that. And then when it changed after I got my law degree, people saw me, after I earned my law degree, and I saw the difference in the way people treated me then. Little tiny microaggressions are hard to explain to folks who are never subjected to them. So I will go back to the Bodega, Hennessy, and Newport's thing. There were people in the room who did not hear what I heard. And most of the people of color in that room heard the same thing I heard, because it was a microaggression. It was one of those little tiny little things that always happens, that you always have to overcome, that you always have to be mindful for. I was raised by, right now I have my grandparents, both of my grandparents' degrees framed in my home office. At a time when most African Americans didn't graduate from high school, and if they did graduate from high school, it was a big deal. It wasn't necessarily assumed that you would go to college. And I have their bachelor's degrees and my grandfather's master's degree. And I look at those things because I know that what they told me on a regular basis was that, one, you have a responsibility to work harder just to get half as far, and to be a credit to your race. A credit to your race. Don't allow yourself to be in a situation where when you do something bad and you do something wrong and you do something where they look at all of us like that. You have to be a credit to your race. And in today's parlance, what that means is when someone who is Muslim commits a crime, it's terrorism. When someone who's white commits a crime, it's a mental illness. Because we don't attach individual activities of white people to the entire race. But we do for Muslims, we do for Hispanics, we do for African Americans. And that is what is shown on a regular basis, every single day, and it gets reinforced every single day. And it's how people now accept as a normal fact of life that incarceration rates and all those things for African Americans are what you should expect because they're more violent. If you never see pictures of violence in any other kind of way, and when that picture is a brown face, we don't account for the fact how you push that out into your view of everybody you see that way. When I came to the Senate 10 years ago, I was the youngest woman on the floor that had kids in public school. So education funding and all those things was personal to me. And I knew that I was up against one, and when I say youngest person on the floor, like the average age at that time in the Senate was older than me. It was older than me. Even now, like I'm 45 now, and the age of the General Assembly is coming down quite a bit, actually. But I knew that how I dressed, how I spoke, how I told stories, where I chose to go, whether I could go by myself or not, or I needed somebody else to go with me or not, was dependent upon the fact that I was very keenly conscious and aware of being African American. And when people are surprised by that, I just have to say, you would not be surprised by that if you were subjected to that on a regular basis. The way we move through the world is different. When I look at my sons, I have two sons. I have three kids, actually. They're 18, 20, and 22. And I know that statistically speaking, my sons and my husband are still within the age. My sons and their father are still within a statistical demographic that says they're more likely to die in a routine traffic stop than they are to have a college degree. I know every day that they leave my porch that I have to, as a parent, prepare them for the way the world sees them. I tell a story about my son all the time. My son is 6'1" and amazingly handsome and very articulate. And he wears hoodies and he likes Skittles, and he buys iced tea at the convenience store. And when what happened to Trayvon Martin happened to Trayvon Martin, he was the exact same age. And I had plenty of discussions with colleagues about why those stories hit us the way they hit us. And I had to keep coming back to, if you are not subjected to the level of treatment we are trying to explain to you, you have no right to tell me how to respond to it. And that's what I mean by getting back to the getting comfortable having uncomfortable conversations. I watched my son have to learn how to move through the world, how to hold his body so you're not afraid, how to stand really still in an elevator so you don't clutch your purse, to get the note from him as he's walking from DePaul. He's almost graduating in accounting at MIS. And knowing when people cross the street because they saw him coming their direction. So he wrote a letter, and he sent it to me, and the letter was like, I wish I could tell you who I am and that you don't have to be afraid. His mother is a policymaker. He is learning to navigate the city of Chicago, and I have to hold back being petrified on a regular basis that it could be the wrong place, the wrong time, and that even his two upwardly mobile, highly educated, advanced degree having, sitting in positions of authority and power parents will not be able to protect him if he's in a situation that we cannot protect him from. And if you are not in a position to know what it's like to parent under those conditions, then you cannot tell me how to respond to it. And when I walk on that Senate floor, I bring all of that with me. I bring the weight of my grandparents. I bring the weight of their parents. I bring the weight of history. I bring the weight of being a parent of these kids at this time, in this world, in this moment. I bring the weight of all of that with me every time I walk into a room and try to debate policy in a way where people at some point, please hear me, because the only way to hear me is to see me. And I need you to see that I'm a regular person who's trying to make it in life every single day too, but there are encumbrances upon this life that are just different. And you can't account for them for any other reason than race. It is if it was the question of the color line in the 20th century, it is the question of the color line in the 21st century. It is just now a bigger, wider conversation. We're not just having a conversation about black and white. We talk about unconscious bias or implicit bias and how that affects the way we do policy. It is not just black and white. It is the fact that we are opening this conversation up to multiple folks and multiple things. And to the people who are uncomfortable about adding LGBTQ status to those things, especially in relation to civil rights conversations, and I've been in the middle of those debates as well, I say to them, these forms of discrimination are just different rooms in the same house. And the house is not going to come down until you get comfortable being uncomfortable.
I get nothing.
Wow, that's
All right, so I think I would like to open it up to questions from the audience. We've got about 10 minutes roughly left. Oh, okay, my watch is fast? Really? My watch is fast? Oh, okay. Never mind. No, go ahead. No. Yes, miss.
If I may, just because you want to be heard. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and listen to you. My question is, I don't get it.
I don't think so.
So, again, thank you. In terms of structural and systemic racism, how do you talk about that when you've got colleagues who won't put their name on the tax bill, and they are women and or African Americans?
So I shoot straight with no chaser. You have to find ways to, one of the best things that happened in the last budget impasse, as horrible as it was, and it was another one of those examples where legislators didn't get paid for 9 months. And there was no outcry of sympathy for us, like when the federal workers had their furlough days, came out of nowhere. And the majority of us in the legislature are rank and file, not owners of law firms, not independently wealthy, this is a citizen democracy. And when you saw who that impacted, members of the Black Caucus, members of the Hispanic Caucus, women, unmarried people, people who were divorced and had kids and child support things that were coming out of their checks. We had people almost losing their houses. And in those moments, I remember I was invited to sit on the balcony of our former governor. And I remember sitting there and I made him look at me. And I said, I can't think of anything more crooked, as you would say, than to change my vote because I think it'll get me paid. There's some things that you're asking for that I will never vote for. I don't care how long you hold my check. I don't care how long you try to freeze me out. I don't care. I will never do that. I said, but what you are doing is blurring the lines between the executive branch and the legislative branch in a way that is hurting only some of us very, very personally. You're not getting at the Speaker and the Senate President. You are getting directly to rank and file folks. This is their only job. We can't afford this. It was a mirror of what was happening to investments across the state. When you see where money goes and where it doesn't. When you see when it goes to what communities it goes to and where it doesn't. When you see people argue to keep everything the way it is right now, because the way it is right now is working for them. And I looked at him and I said, I need you to see what you are doing to me personally, and I don't work for you. So I will make this argument, I will make this stand. I don't care what they say to me later. This is, and it was another one of those moments. I know what you'll say to win. What are you willing to lose over? So I will talk to you about the disparate impact on the communities that you are starving right now. And I will stand in the gap for labor rights, and I will stand in the gap for these are my ovaries, not yours, you can't touch them. I will stand in the gap for all of that stuff. I will do that. And if you snatch my check, hold my check, I don't care. You're not gonna freeze me out, you're not gonna make me quit, you're not gonna make me go, but I'm gonna make you look at me. And I remember thinking to myself that whole time, do not cry. Do not sit on this man's balcony and cry. Just do not, because everything in me I was mad. And I don't even take this pejoratively, I'm still a girl. I was mad. And I was like, do not cry. And there were other people on that balcony who were not in the same situation. And I pointed them out, I was like, she doesn't need it, she doesn't need it, she doesn't need it, you are threatening my mortgage, my house, my thing. I was like, and matter of fact, in this moment in time, coming to work and saying no to half the stuff that you're saying is me doing my job. My job is not to say yes just because you said it. I don't work for you. This is a separate and co-equal branch. Don't get me started talking about this is an Article I branch. We were contemplated first, before the executive branch. Legislation doesn't happen without this body. So in that moment, I wanted to be exactly who it is I know myself to be, that in hard conversations, when you have to tell the story of what the results of these policies are actually doing to people, that you have to stand firm, you have to stand strong. I heard a leader only needs 3 things: a wishbone, a jawbone, and a backbone. And I usually say it where a wishbone, so you can keep hoping and dreaming for your community, because you can do that for free. And a jawbone, so you can tell the stories. And a backbone, because this is hard. This is hard. And lots of times when you're standing there, you might be standing there alone. So talking about structural racism is a part of me. It's what you get when I walk in the room. It's what you get if I'm in the middle of a debate. I will never not say what has to be said.
Other questions?
You think it's working? Oh, okay, yes it is. So how do we turn around this debate question around taxes? I mean, it's so to the point that our elected officials feel compelled that they can't even use the word that
That's why we
says
say
tax-
revenue.
revenue. But how do we turn that around? I mean, we're a room of about 100 people. We've heard Ralph's telling us about we are doomed as far as education funding is concerned, even with the formula of $350 million per year for the next X number of years, we're still not going to have enough money. How do we turn this around? What is the rhetoric that we need to use? What is the emotional gut punches that we need to all, I guess, inflict upon others in order to turn this conversation around? Because I'm really concerned that we're going to lose this debate even before it's even started.
I think that the pushback for any of those things is that you need to change talking about taxes, we can't talk about them in silos. That the taxes you pay for something. So it's the reverse of the conversation that we have when you talk about where do you want to cut? Tell me what you want to get rid of. Nobody raises their hand and says, I want to cut higher ed. Nobody says, I want to cut public schools. Like, you know what, them little third graders, they're not that cute. Like nobody goes to, nobody goes to that. So you do have to change, we do have to get better at closing the distance between what we're investing in and the fact that that's not stealing your money. That's why I say I don't come to a tax conversation as though it's theft of my wages. There are things that I believe that the state needs to do, that I believe that the state needs to have, that I believe that the state needs to, so that all of us can thrive, and that costs money. We have to pay for that. So I usually start out by saying, okay, number one, this tax thing is not offending me. Now, I do demand to know that the money I send is going to what you said it was going to, and I do demand to know that the money you said that the people that you elect are good stewards of what it is that we're supposed to be doing. And that's where you can get into like the political fight about it. But the raw argument about taxes and whether this is evil and it's the destruction of the world and all the rest of the stuff, is like, I'm like, okay, so you would rather be like what? If you live in your own gated community and you don't have to worry about police because you got security guards, or you have all the money in the world, send your kids to private school so you don't have to worry about them little kids in the public school system, or you have your own private fire protection district thing that you can do that you pay into, even those things you pay into it. Even those, you pay into it. Homeowners association fees, everybody pays into it, so the grass in the homeowners association gets cut. And so there's plants done, everybody pays into it. There's nothing in the world that we do alone. We've allowed a very, very small number of people to argue that we need to keep it exactly the way it is right now. The biggest lesson I learned when I first came to the legislature was two things: control the document and follow the money. I control my bills. I'm the master of my bills. Control the document and follow the money. You follow the money, then you know why people are arguing what they're arguing. And so when someone comes to me and they're like, how dare you? Or you can go into any room and say, how many people in here do not rely on government? Do not rely on government at all. How many people in here do not rely on government at all? And it's amazing how in certain parts of the state, folks will raise their hand and say, I don't rely, I do nothing, I don't use nothing. I'm like, okay, how many people have a grandparent in a nursing home? How many people in here went to public school? How many people in here, and then I go through all these, how many people in here took the tax credit to write off on your mortgage? How many people here own farm equipment for my district? How many people in here own farm equipment? How many people in here want the tax credits on weed, seed, feed, and equipment? How many people in here breathe air? Or walk on roads, drive a car? There's no such thing as anybody who doesn't rely on government. And we have allowed folks to behave as though none of this works. So it's this interesting cycle. It's like, this doesn't work, so don't put money into it, because if you put money into it, it's not gonna work. And the reason it's not working because you didn't put any money into it, it's like this. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. We are getting the government we deserve because we're not demanding the government we need.
Any other questions? Go back here to the student.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm a little nervous, so I kind of wrote my question down. But so So I took a class last semester called Race in American Politics, and I learned a lot of terms like implicit bias, microaggressions, unconscious bias, and I know you touched on that a little bit. And I feel like when I learned that, I could finally give voice to what I was experiencing as a Chinese American. So I'm just wondering how you prepare your sons to face the outside world, and what do you think people like who learn these terms and their history, what can they do to not be discouraged by it, but how can they use this information?
Oh, that's a really good question. And that's a really good question.
She's a Roosevelt student, of course.
Of course, it's a really good question, especially
Of course
since
it is.
you all are building a socially conscious world. And I did, a side note, my mom went to school here too. So when I was 7, my sister was 7 and I was 9. I played in all these classrooms, and you know, now do you still have blackboards in here, like, or are they whiteboards now? Yeah, they're chalkboards. We used to just go draw pictures in classrooms and find fountains and try to find quarters. Anyway, I think that for the most part, to the first question about how do I prepare my sons and my daughter with different challenges, because when I talk about my daughter's bookended by 2 boys. Sometimes when we rely on criminal justice conversations, I will tell the stories of my sons when I talk about implicit bias and the intersection of what it's like to grow up as an African American girl into a woman. There are a lot of things that I talk about with my daughter, even though I recognize that both sets of conversations are important to each other in different ways. My sons need to understand me and their sister, so that they grow up in a world where an intelligent, powerful, impassioned woman who's got something to say is not to be feared, it's to be celebrated. And she needs to see what it takes to grow up to be a black man in this society and all that comes with that. My husband and I spend a decent amount of time, largely like early on with parents, you don't necessarily want to talk about negative things all the time. You want to keep your kids in this bubble, like you are brilliant, you can do anything, you're so smart, you come back with your trophy and your certificate for just showing the hell up, and it's great, like those are my babies. And then they started to have to face the world. The first time they had one of the suburban police officers refer to them as the group of niggers over there. And they flew home and came back, and we had to have that talk. And I can't honestly tell you exactly what we said. We talked a little bit about the fact that unfortunately that is the country we live in, and there are always going to be people who are like that, and that does not define you. That ignorance does not define you. That we don't do mediocrity, and we don't succumb to the opinions of other people. Matter of fact, the opinions of other people are actually none of our business. I could care less. We tried to make them stand a little taller. We tried to tell them stories that happened to us so they could know that it didn't break us either. Whenever we hear, and I do the same thing as it relates to gender issues as I do to race issues, when I hear comments that they might parrot or repeat that comes from just, the inundation of social media and 9 million cable channels that I can't police, I am very clear about stopping it midway through the conversation, like, nope, we don't say that, and here's why. When we were at Thanksgiving dinner, and I remember my grandfather made this comment about, like, don't be an Indian giver. I'm like, nope, we don't say that. Here's why. You don't go steal land from people, and then when they fight to take it back, call them Indian givers. That's not, we don't say that. So I meet it when I see it. I meet it when I hear it. I believe very, very strongly in it's not the actions of our enemies, it's the silence of our friends. So when you see it, you have to say it. You have to acknowledge it, you have to say it. It is an art to say it in a way where someone can receive it. But I'm comfortable understanding the fact that the person who can't receive it, that doesn't offend me either. You can go on about your merry little way. I said what I had to say. Using words, we find now there's a lot of new vocabulary in the ether. So when it comes to rights amongst various underrepresented, or various groups of people, depending on what category they put themselves in and what intersections all those find, what they find in, wherever you are, what box you're in. And many of us are in multiple boxes. There's a lot of new vocabulary, and even the new vocabulary is hard for people to accept. It's like, wait a minute, I just got LGBTQ, what's the plus? Like it's hard to get people to be comfortable hearing new things and incorporating new words into the way we talk. So words like microaggressions and implicit bias and unconscious bias. I just ran a bill on unconscious bias in the medical profession dealing with maternal mortality. So we know that American women are dying at 5 times the rates of women in every other industrialized country for preventable things within a year after childbirth. We are the only industrialized country where maternal mortality rates are going up. African American women are dying at 6 times the rate of white women in just this country, which means we are dying at third world country rates. So we have a bill to deal with that. We have a bill to deal with unconscious bias in the medical profession, like how you present to doctors and things like that. And I was sitting in committee, and my colleagues did not want to support the resolution because there was a statement in there that said, understanding that there is deeply ingrained systemic racism in our American health systems. And that one sentence made people apoplectic. And they wanted to, they would not vote for the bill because that was me saying that everybody's racist. And I said, I did not say that everybody was racist. They said, you said that understand there's deeply ingrained, I said, I do understand that there's deeply ingrained systemic racism in our American health systems. Well, for people where there's not a whole, like I come from an area where there are hardly any African Americans, so there's no racism. Oh, okay. Like, where do you start to unpack that? And I just kept thinking to myself, I'm like, they're saying this on the record. Like, this is being recorded, and they're actually saying this on the record. So I'm like, keep talking. So we went back and forth, and some of those comments where it's like, look, I'm talking about women who look like me who are dying, and we need to figure out why, and you can't control for educational status or socioeconomic background or any of those things. You can have a woman like Serena Williams almost die of a blood clot because she was strong enough to advocate for herself when everybody was telling her, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine. Until she was like, no, I'm not. I want an MRI, I would die. I know my body. I need this. This is the most prestigious athlete in the world right now in her sport who almost died for the same reason that somebody who we're trying to expand Medicaid service for to 12 months postpartum would die for. We know that there's data that says that when we present at the hospital, people think that Black people can tolerate more pain. And you can see that in things like, say, what happened in Ferguson, Missouri. The argument that this kid coming up to a police car was gonna be able to like superhumanly withstand 29 bullets flying at him because he was charging the car with an officer in the car, with all the artillery and gear in the car. But this kid, who, big kid, but kid, could magically withstand bullets flying all over the place because, I don't know if you all know, but African American men have superhuman strength. So we know that young kids in pediatrics, young African American kids are assumed to be much older than they are chronologically. We're assumed to be sexually active before we are. Our children aren't given the benefit of youth or the mistakes thereof of youth, the way other kids are. And I wanted to talk about all of that, but we couldn't get past this person saying, you said there was systemic racism in all of our American health systems. It took everything in me to A, calm down, and 1, I need to get this bill out of this committee. 2, I need to say what it is I have to say in a way that people can hear it, and that's a principle for me. So if that sentence bothers you, then I'm not gonna be implicit anymore. I'm gonna be explicit in this bill. As a matter of fact, okay, I'll take that sentence out. And when I came back, I had all the data. So now the resolution explicitly says, due to these findings, this is what we need to study. I listened to a debate, my colleagues, my African American colleagues were like, don't you dare change a word. Don't you dare change a word. And I changed it because I was trying to make a point. 2 weeks later, the individual who led the fight against voting for this bill came over to me to apologize. He said that he used a prosecutorial tone that he recognized wasn't befitting of the room or of me, the sponsor. He said, I should have voted for that. I should have listened to what you were saying instead of answering emotionally. He said, and I want to be better than that. So I'm coming over to tell you, I apologize. I know that there are people who would see that moment and in all the cynicism that we have right now would say, yeah, right. But it was a moment in time between me and my colleague. The bill came back to committee, it passed out unanimously, it passed off the floor unanimously because I gave myself space to listen to him. I also gave him the space for me not beating him down on the back of the Senate thing, like I'm gonna let you apologize. And I'm gonna try to hear you. And I'm gonna meet you in this moment where you're at. We agree on next to nothing politically. But we all need to take those times to listen and to try to hear so that we can change. It's not going to happen without that. Anger and darkness don't ever trump anger and darkness. Only light and love does that.
So I don't think we're going to allow another question because that was a great close. And I don't want to waste a great close. I'm going to just say that there is a reception to follow in what room? Right behind me, in that room. I want to thank Senator Hutchinson. I'm going to point out, the Center for Tax and Budget Accountability, it's been our honor to work with you.
Thank you.
Through your career here. And we hope to continue working with you as you become, the next governor, the next president, whatever it is you're going to do. And I want to tell everyone here that's not familiar with public policy in the state just a couple of things. But for the Illinois Black Legislative Caucus, this state would pass no progressive legislation. That's the truth. If you look at the really good bills that have passed, the school funding bill that passed, everything else, it was due to the political effort of the Black Legislative Caucus. They don't get the credit they deserve for passing thoughtful, progressive policies that benefit everyone. So number one, it's a real honor to work with someone who's been a leader in that caucus. And number two, this is what the Rubloff Professorship is all about here at Roosevelt University. Our university's mission is about social and economic justice. The Center for Tax and Budget Accountability's mission is social and economic justice through policy change. And over the years, hopefully, Roosevelt University will also be working closely with Senator Hutchinson, the Black Caucus, to make real progressive change, not just in this state, but in this nation. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.